Why do you keep setting goals you never follow through on? Why does it feel like there's something inside you pulling you back, even when you're desperate to move forward? Today, we're going to expose and break the invisible pattern that's been sabotaging your progress for years. This isn't about motivation. This is about liberation. Let's get to work. There's a version of you, bold, confident, relentless. That's buried underneath years of fear, self-doubt, and second guessing. And you know it because every time you try to level up, every time you get a glimpse of what's possible, you pull back, you shrink, you hesitate. It's not life, it's a habit of holding yourself back. Today, we're going to shatter that habit. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. You weren't born afraid to speak up. You didn't come into this world unsure of your worth. You learned to doubt yourself. You learned to hesitate. Through failure, through criticism, through years of playing small just to feel safe. But here's the true thing. If you learn to limit yourself, you can learn to free yourself. We're born into this world with eyes and open hearts. No fear, no hesitation, no doubt. A baby doesn't second guess when it tries to take its first steps. It stumbles, falls, maybe cries, but it gets back up again and again. Because in those early moments of life, there's no internal dialogue saying, maybe I'm not cut out for this. There's no shame, no judgment, no fear of failure, just instinct, pure drive to grow, to move forward. So the real question is this: if we weren't born afraid, where did the fear come from? It was learned. You learned to doubt yourself. You learned to hesitate before taking action. You learned to overthink, to question your worth, to fear judgment, to stay in your comfort zone, because somewhere along the way, you experienced pain, rejection, embarrassment, failure. Maybe you were told you weren't good enough. Maybe you failed publicly once, and the sting of it rewrote the way you saw yourself. Maybe your own parents, teachers, coaches, people who meant well, unknowingly planted seeds of limitation in your mind. That's the reality. Self-sabotage is not part of your DNA. It's a habit you picked up over time. And like any habit, it can be broken. I remember talking to a woman named Erica. She had dreams of becoming a speaker, massive passion, a gift for communication, a real hunger to inspire others, but she kept freezing up every time an opportunity came. She'd say yes and then pull out. She'd start working on a talk and then tear it apart, convinced it wasn't good enough. We got into a conversation and I asked her something simple. Who told you it wasn't safe to be seen? Her eyes widened like I touched something she hadn't thought about in years. Turns out she grew up in a home where confidence was mistaken for arrogance. Don't get too big for your britches, her father would say. People don't like show-offs. And so, little Erica made a silent decision. Being visible is dangerous. It leads to criticism. It's safer to play small. And now, here she was, 37 years old, brilliant, ready, but paralyzed by a habit she didn't even know she had. That's how this works. It's subtle. It creeps in. A bad experience here, a harsh word there, and suddenly we start building patterns that look like protection, but they're really prisons. Think about this. Have you ever had a big idea, felt inspired, ready to take the leap? And then, just like that, your brain kicked in. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I'm not ready? That's not instinct. That's conditioning. That's years of mental repetition, reinforcing the idea that forward equals danger. And here's the kicker. Most people think they're being rational when really they're just being rehearsed. They're repeating thought patterns so many times, they've mistaken them for truth. Now let me give you another story. This one's about a guy named Jordan. In high school, he wanted to be a writer. He used to stay up late, scribbling short stories in notebooks while the rest of the world slept. But after submitting a story to a school magazine and getting rejected, along with a note that said, try something more realistic, he stopped, cold, didn't write a word for 8 years, until one day, During a workshop, he was asked to write about his most painful memory. He wrote about that rejection. The teacher read it and said, this is incredible. You've got something rare. It lit a fuse. And when I asked Jordan what made him stop writing in the first place, he said, I just assumed they were right. That one comment became my belief. And after that, I never even gave myself a chance. That's how fast it can happen. One experience, one moment of emotional intensity, and boom, a habit is born. A habit of doubt, a habit of hesitation, a habit of burying your potential because it feels safer than facing disappointment again. But here's the truth that most people never realizing: if a habit can be learned, it can also be unlearned. You see, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. If you've trained it to associate growth with danger, it'll scream every time you try to change. Every time you try to speak up, every time you try to go bigger, step outside the mold, raise your standards, it'll tell you to retreat. And this is where most people lose. They hear the alarm and they obey it, not realizing that the alarm is just a program running on outdated code. Let's go deeper. What you do repeatedly, you become. If you repeatedly avoid taking risks, you become someone who defaults to comfort. If you repeatedly stop yourself from speaking up, you become someone who assumes their voice doesn't matter. Not because it's true, but because it's what you've practiced. It's not your truth. It's your training. Think of an athlete, someone like Serena Williams. You think she's confident because she's successful. No, she's successful because she trained herself day after day to ignore the voice of doubt and focus on execution. She had losses, painful ones, but she didn't let the fear of losing become a habit. She let focus become the habit. Resilience, precision. Same thing with someone like Elon Musk. Whatever you think about him, the man failed. Publicly, repeatedly, expensively. Rockets blew up. People mocked him, but he didn't learn to pull back. He learned to reframe failure as feedback. That became his habit. That's the choice. You either let your past experiences define the limits of your actions, or you use them as fuel to rise. It's just like that classic story of the elephant and the rope. When a baby elephant is tied to a stake in the ground, it tugs and pulls, but it's too weak to break free. Eventually, it stops trying. And years later, as a full-grown elephant, stronger than 10 men, it still doesn't try because it believes the rope can hold it. That's you. That's me. That's every person who ever bought into a lie about what they're capable of. You stopped pulling. Not because you can't break free, but because you stopped trying. And now, right now, you've got to make a decision, not just in your head, but in your body, your emotions, your breath. You've got to decide that the story ends here. That every time you catch yourself falling into that old habit of holding back, you interrupt the pattern. You say, that's the old me. You say, that's not who I am anymore. You do something bold. You move. You speak. You take the action your fear is telling you not to. And when you do that, something shifts. Even if your voice shakes, even if you sweat through your shirt, even if it's messy and awkward and imperfect, you're rewiring your nervous system to associate movement with power, not fear. The most powerful people in the world aren't fearless. They've just practiced ignoring fear long enough that courage became their habit. So next time you feel the urge to pull back, ask yourself, is this me? Or is this just the old habit talking? Because once you see it for what it is, you can finally choose something different. You don't act on what you know. You act on what you believe about who you are. If deep down you believe you're not good enough, you'll always find a way to sabotage the win. You'll delay. You'll distract. You'll say, I'm not ready yet. Change doesn't happen when you get a new strategy. Change happens when you rewrite your identity. You say, I'm done being the person who waits. I'm done being the one who starts and doesn't finish. You don't behave based on what you want. You behave based on what you believe. That's the difference. Most people never even stop to notice. They set goals. They write them down. They talk about what they're going to do. But deep inside, something doesn't match. Their identity, the way they see themselves, completely contradicts the thing they say they want. It's like trying to drive a Ferrari with the parking brake on. You can hit the gas all you want. You can push. You can hustle. But if your internal blueprint says, I'm not the kind of person who finishes things, or I've never been confident, or success isn't for people like me, you will always find a way to bring yourself back down. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity. Let that sink in. Because this is the invisible wall that keeps stuck year after year, even when they're doing everything. Right? They're reading the books. They're going to seminars. If they're setting resolutions every January with fire in their chest. But if they're still wearing the same mental name tag, if they still see themselves as the insecure one, the lazy one, the one who always screws it up in the end, it doesn't matter how badly they want change. They won't allow themselves to keep it. It's not self-help. It's self-image. And that image runs the whole show. Take Michael, for example. A man in his 40s, worked in tech for over a decade, super smart, always had ideas, but he never followed through. He'd start a side hustle, get all excited, build momentum, and then he'd vanish. He'd go silent. I'd ask him, what happened? And he'd say, I don't know, I just didn't feel like I had it in me. That's identity. Michael grew up in a family where risk was frowned upon. Stability was sacred. You got a good job, you kept your head down, and you stayed grateful. So every time he tried to step into something bold, something unconventional, his old identity would whisper, who do you think you are? And instead of challenging that voice, he obeyed like a reflex. He didn't lack strategy. He lacked permission from himself. Until the day he did something powerful. He said, I'm tired of identifying with the scared version of me. That's not who I am anymore. And he made a choice to redefine himself, not based on his past, not based on what people expected, but based on who he decided to become. That's where transformation lies. Not in willpower, not in positive thinking, but an identity shift. Because when you change the way you see yourself, everything else follows. Suddenly, you don't have to push self to show up. You expect yourself to show up. You don't have to pretend to be confident. You become the kind of person who acts confidently because that's who you are now. You don't fear failure the same way because your identity is no longer tied to a fragile version of you. That doesn't mean you fake it. It means you forget, one decision at a time. And it's not some big, dramatic moment. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's in the smallest of moments. You're sitting there, doubting yourself again, starting to spiral. And instead of giving in, you say, no, that's not me anymore. You take a breath. You stand taller. You write the email. You make the call. You move. And just like that, your nervous system gets a new message, a new story, one that says, I'm capable. I'm consistent. I show up. And when that story starts to take root, your actions begin to match. It's not about achieving something to feel worthy. It's about realizing that who you choose to be right now has the power to override every story, every excuse, every fear that's ever held you back. Because in the end, your life is just a mirror reflecting back what you believe about yourself. Change the belief and the reflection changes too. Habits don't just live in your mind. They live in your body, in the way you breathe, in the way you stand, in the tone used when you speak to yourself. You want to break the pattern. Change your state. Right now. Get up. Move. Shift. Roar if you have to. Get loud. Breathe deeper. Because when your state changes, your standard changes. And when your standard changes, what you tolerate from yourself changes. You stop accepting average. You stop negotiating with fear. Change doesn't start with information. It starts with energy, with state. That's what most people miss when they try to change their life. They gather books, courses, journals, a podcast. They absorb more and more strategy, waiting for something to finally click. But what they don't realize is this: you don't act on what you know, you act on how you feel. And how you feel in any given moment is determined by your state. Let's be real. How many times have you known exactly what you needed to do, but still didn't do it? You knew you needed to get up early. You knew you needed to make that call. You knew you needed to hit the gym, post the video, speak up in that meeting. But you didn't. Not because you were lazy, not because you didn't care, because your state was low. Your energy was drained. You were operating from a place of hesitation, stress, or just plain fatigue. When your state is off, your standards drop. You settle, you procrastinate, you justify the delay. But when your state is on, when you're energized, focused, grounded, suddenly action feels natural. It's not hard to do the thing. You want to do it. You move without negotiation. That's the secret most successful people understand. If you want to change your life, you don't wait for motivation. You learn how to change your state on command. Let me tell you a quick story. I once met a guy named Ray, corporate consultant. Sharp, articulate, polished, but he was stuck, big time. Every time he got close to closing a deal, he'd freeze up. He'd lose momentum. He told me, I just don't have that killer instinct. So I asked, what's your state before you go into those meetings? And he said, honestly, nervous, overthinking, doubting myself. There it was. It wasn't his skill set. It wasn't his pitch. It was his state. He was walking into the room with the emotional energy of someone who had already lost. Shoulders slouched, voice uncertain, breathing shallow. So we flipped it. I showed him how to activate a peak state, just like an athlete stepping into the ring. Shoulders back, chest open, breathing deep, moving his body, using his voice, not faking confidence, generating it. And guess what? He started closing deals, not because he became someone new, but because he finally aligned his state with the outcome he wanted. Your body is a tool. Your breath is a weapon. Your voice is a switch. When you learn how to master your state, how to shift from hesitation to certainty, from fear to action, you start raising the standards of what you tolerate. You stop selling for, maybe later. You stop living at the mercy of your moods. You don't need to feel like it. You decide to become it. That's when everything changes, because standards are the invisible force that shapes your destiny. If your standard is, I always show up no matter what, your life will look very different from someone whose standard is, I do it when I feel like it. If your standard is, I take care of my body every day, that decision will ripple into your focus, your confidence, your relationships. If your standard is, I speak with courage even when it's hard, you'll become someone people trust, respect, follow. And guess what? Those standards don't live in your journal. They live in your state, your physical, emotional, and mental alignment. You can't raise your standards consistently if your state is always crashing. People say, I want more discipline. No, you want more access to your peak state. Because when you're in the right state, discipline becomes your default. Action becomes automatic. Hesitation dies. Think about the last time you felt unstoppable, like truly on fire. Wasn't it easier to act, to follow through, to speak boldly? That wasn't a fluke. That was a state, one you can return to, one you can build around. But first, you have to recognize that change doesn't begin with goals. It begins with physiology, with movement, with breath, with what you focus on. Because you can't think your way into a new standard. You have to step into it, embody it, feel it in your bones. And that shift, that moment you interrupt the autopilot, stand up straight, breathe deeper, and take action, you're not just changing how you feel. You're changing who you become. Every time you hesitate, you're reinforcing a pattern. But every time you move forward in spite of fear, even a little, you build a new emotional home, a place inside where courage lives, where momentum is normal, where action is automatic. You're not chasing motivation anymore. You're becoming the kind of person who takes action no matter what. Every one of us has a place we return to emotionally, again and again. A kind of internal home. And the problem, for most people, that emotional home is built on fear, doubt, hesitation, frustration. Even when things are going well, even when progress is happening, they somehow find their way back to stress, overwhelm, or self-sabotage because that's where they're most familiar. That's what feels normal, not good, empowering, but familiar. It's what you've conditioned yourself to return to, like someone who always finds something to stress about, even when life is calm. Or the person who always finds a reason to feel not good enough, even after they accomplish something meaningful. It's not that life is sabotaging them. It's that they've trained their nervous system to expect a certain kind of feeling. And when they don't feel it, they unconsciously create it. That's your emotional home. The question is, what kind of home are you living in? Is it built on peace, drive, and confidence? Or is it made of anxiety, hesitation, and fear? And here's the thing most people don't realize. You don't just return to your emotional home, you protect it. You defend it. If your emotional home is struggle and things start going smoothly, you'll find a way to mess it up. Why? Because a part of you is more comfortable with chaos than calm. You think it's bad luck. You think it's self-discipline. But often, it's just that you haven't upgraded your emotional address. Let me tell you about Nicole. She worked her way out of a toxic relationship, built a business from scratch, and started finally making serious money. She was proud, confident, but after a few months, she started feeling uncomfortable in the success. She'd wake up anxious, question everything, push clients away, procrastinate. And when I asked her why, she said, it just feels weird. Like I don't deserve it. Like I'm waiting for it to fall apart. That's it. That's the emotional home at work. Her nervous system didn't recognize peace. It didn't recognize progress. It recognized the stress, the fight, the struggle. So when it wasn't there, it created it just to get back to normal. Think about that. We chase happiness, but when it arrives, we get uncomfortable with it because it doesn't match the emotion we've lived in for years. And unless you intentionally build a new emotional foundation, you'll always drift back to the old one. It's like moving into a beautiful new house, but every night you sneak back to your old apartment because the new place feels too nice, too unfamiliar. But guess what? Emotions are not fixed. They're patterns. They're habits, and habits can be changed. You can build a new emotional home just like you can build a new body, one rep at a time, one day at a time. You start by interrupting the old story. The moment you catch yourself slipping back into that familiar feeling, whether it's self-doubt, anger, guilt, you stop, you breathe, you shift, you say, that's not who I am anymore. You move your body, you raise your voice, you rewire your focus. Not because it feels natural, but because it doesn't. Because that's how you know it's working. The more you do it, the more your nervous system starts to adjust. The more often you experience peace, confidence, drive, the more your body starts craving that instead of chaos. And the more you stay there, the more it becomes your new home. It's not about being happy all the time. That's not realistic. Life throws curveballs. Pain shows up. Fear knocks on the door. But when your emotional home is strength, when your default is calm and control instead of panic and paralysis, you bounce back faster. You don't spiral. You don't crash. You respond. That's the real power. It's not about avoiding the storm. It's about becoming the kind of person who can stand in it, breathe through it, and not lose who they are. And it starts with a choice. A choice to stop visiting that old house. A choice to stay in the new one long enough for it to feel like yours. A choice to condition your body, your heart, and your mind to expect something better. Not just once, every day. So let me ask you right now, no fluff, no filter. So now the choice is in your hands. Do you keep returning to that old emotional home where hesitation Fear and playing small feel safe? Or do you finally decide to pack up and move? You don't need permission. You don't need the perfect moment. You just need a decision, a moment where you say, enough. I'm done living in survival. I'm done living in stories that were never mine to begin with. You start building the new home, brick by brick, by choosing courage over comfort, presence over panic, ownership over excuses. And yes, it will feel unfamiliar at first. That's okay. Growth always feels like resistance before it becomes natural. But every time you catch yourself drifting back to that old energy and you stop, breathe, and choose differently, you're laying the foundation for the life you were born to live. You are not your patterns. You are the architect of your state, your story, your standards. And if you can build it once, just for a moment, you can build it again and again until that becomes your new normal, until peace becomes familiar, until confidence feels like home, until momentum feels automatic. And it all starts now with one decision. Are you ready to break the habit of holding yourself back? Because if you are, then today is the day you stop waiting. You stop watching life pass by. You stop letting fear win. You don't need more time. You need a decision right now. Draw the line, burn the boat, step into the fire, and never look back.